My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Genesis chapter 5, verse 24 says, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." Exodus chapters 3 and 4 describe God speaking to Moses from inside a bush that burned but was not consumed. In the Book of Ezekiel, the prophet has a vision of 4 intermeshed wheels in the sky that contained and were controlled by the spirit of 4 living creatures, each having 4 faces. In almost every religion and faith, from all parts of the world, there are comparable stories of what ancient alien theorists have postulated as extraterrestrial contact with advanced technology that the observers at the time deemed as divine. How may people of faith today receive this modern interpretation? Do these theories challenge belief in the divine, or may these mysteries even deepen one's faith? How does this affect those of us who have experienced sightings of UFOs or had contact experiences? Are these phenomenon and faith mutually exclusive or actually inclusive? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, W. Wallace Wagner, Jr., has personally addressed and researched these very questions. W. Wallace Wagner, Jr. received his B.S. degree from West Virginia University in 1981 and subsequently did graduate work at Marshall University and the University of Charleston. He gained a unique understanding of the Bible from 40 years of study, mostly self-taught. He has an interest in UFO-type craft in the Bible, prophecy, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Disclosure Movement, and crop circles. In September 2016, he had his own UFO sighting that affected his sense of spirituality. His website is crossingthecrevasse.com, and he joins me this week to discuss his background, his experience, and his book, Crossing the Crevasse, My Epiphany and How It Affected the Bible and Disclosure. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, W. Wallace Wagner, Jr. Welcome, Wallace.
Thank you, Victor. I'm very glad to be here and talk to your audience today.
And thank you for joining us and sharing not only your experience, but your amazing story and how it led to the work that you do. So let's start with your path and how it led to your interest in studying and researching the Bible.
Well, in 2016, I was delivering mail here in Bedford County, Virginia, and I just placed a package under a lady's carport. And I was walking back to my Jeep, and something told me to stop and look up. And I did. And about 2,000 or 2,300 feet over my head was this gleaming white oblong object. It should not have been there. It had no wings, no windows, no nacelles, no exhaust, nothing that would apply for it being there, as in physics as we know it. No windows. It appeared as a solid object. Now, I saw it for about 3 seconds, and then it either cloaked or took off so fast I could not see it. And as the days and months went by, it changed me. And it changed what I had been taught in the Bible. And I have gone back literally and reread the whole book with an open mind. And it has become real for me now. I'm one of those people that it has actually enhanced my faith. And I'll be glad to share some insights, but it was just an eye-awakening experience. And I will say that for me, we're not alone. We've never been alone. And I'm glad we're not alone.
Now, before we start talking about what happened after your sighting, let's talk about your early path and your study with the Bible.
Well, I grew up in a relatively conservative Methodist church. And when I moved to Virginia in 1993 permanently, I became Southern Baptist. And it was extremely conservative. And well, let's just say that if you even mentioned the word UFO, it would be right up there with being a delusion from the devil. Basically, that's the line of thought that was thrown out. So that's pretty much where I came from. So from a conservative Southern Baptist standpoint to where I am now is a pretty big jump.
Obviously.
I'll tell you that.
Obviously. I love the fact that you dedicated crossing the crevasse to your late mother, Nancy. How did her sharing with you contribute to your interests and faith?
Well, I'll tell you what, we grew up in our family loving science fiction. And I owe that to my mother, really. Back when we only had 3 channels to watch, it was a big deal to have a Monday night at the movies and it'd be a science fiction movie. We got to stay up late and watch it. And there were so many of those old UFO movies from the 50s that I really loved. And The Earth Stood Still was one of my favorites. And she was taught when she was in junior high that man would never walk on the moon. And they used the word never. But that was proven wrong, of course. But so I've always had a fascination with what we construed as science fiction. And as I get older, I realize that science fiction, you can just scratch off the word fiction. Most everything that was science fiction back in the 50s is pretty much true today.
And rather than defer your interests, your mother encouraged them.
Correct.
That's
yes,
a wonderful thing. I know many of us who have had experiences and were told by our parents that we were imagining things or take your interests elsewhere. So that was a wonderful gift that she gave you. In many fundamentalist churches, it is taught that the earth is only 6,000 years old. This is something you were taught, but you also questioned. What was the premise of this teaching and how did you react to it?
Well, I've been in several arguments with my brothers and sisters. I wouldn't say arguments. Let's just say very involved discussions about the earth. And I've even had people within my former church tell me that if I did not believe the earth was 6,000 years old, then I really needed to question my salvation. Because you need to believe the Bible for what it says. And if you can't believe God's word, which is inerrant, by the way, then you can't be a Christian. So they took it so literally that a day is but 1,000 years and creation was 6,000 years. And if you can't believe it just like that, well, then, your salvation is called into question. And so that really bothered me. And I just kept that close to my heart with always an open mind. To me, I focused on the first 3 words, which was in the beginning, and it did not say when the beginning was. So when you start to study all this past history of these cultures on this planet and scientific data, even with carbon-14, which is legitimate back to about 50,000 years ago, plus the knowledge I had with the coal business, you realize that this earth is much, much older than 6,000 years. And when creation took 6 days, we really don't know how long that was. It could be truly 6 days, but we don't know the time frame that 6 days was in. It was in the beginning.
Absolutely. And archaeology has shown us that civilizations, as we know them, are a lot older than we ever expected.
Oh, sure. You can look at the Chinese. You can look at the Aborigines in Australia. Their DNA goes back 50,000 years, pretty much without a break. So it's the information's out there. You just have to look at it and study it and then realize that the Bible is a book of books. Each of them tries to stand on its own premise. And when you bind them all together on one book, you're going to have some issues. And that's certainly what I have found. I'm not discrediting God or Jesus, because as I say, my spirituality has actually been increased. I'm just stating that you have to read this with an open mind, and especially with the Old Testament. Victor, for our audience, I want them to know that, for example, the word Elohim has basically been taken out of the Bible, and it was used 2,500 times in the Old Hebrew Bible. It was Elohim who created earth. And the I am on the end, of course, signifies pluralism. And that could mean men and women, both created the earth.
Absolutely.
And the other, 2,500 times, it's just taken out. We don't see that anymore. That's just an example.
Not to mention the fact that when the Bible as we know it today was formulated by Constantine in his Council of Nicaea, many of the parts were left out, the Apocrypha. You are exactly correct. I don't know where to go from here. Let's talk about Origen just for a second for our listeners. He was a protege of Clement of Alexandria. And at one point in his life, he was called the brightest mind the church ever knew. And we're talking about 200, 300 years after Christ's death. And Origen had his own belief system, especially with regards to reincarnation. And he was still called the best mind. So this tenet of reincarnation was really allowed into the church up until the time that the Bible was put together under the Emperor Constantine. So it slowly got weeded out to under a former emperor by the name of Theodore and Justin. They completely eliminated what was left. And the only thing we have that can even be construed as reincarnation now is Elijah being John the Baptist, which a lot of people still don't realize. But sure enough, that's how Elijah died. He was beheaded in the body of John the Baptist. And one of the most amazing works in the Apocrypha, the Book of Enoch, when people have an opportunity, that's still included in the Ethiopian canon, but when people have a chance to read that as a separate entity, it's an amazing story. Well, I am writing a follow-up book to Crossing the Crevasse right now, and in the appendix of it will be the Book of Enoch. Every believer out there needs to be aware of the Book of Enoch and at least read it. Absolutely. It changes a lot of things. It's referred to in Jude rather specifically, but you realize there's many, many angels all around, and it opens up your mind. I think that's the best one-liner I could say. It opens up your mind. I agree with you. Now, there are flood stories from virtually every culture and faith. What has your research yielded about the Great Flood? Well, if you study those people that subscribe to the 6,000-year-old theory, the flood occurred roughly 4,500 years ago. And they would have you believe that things got all mixed up back then. And my studies have shown, specifically coal. I was in the coal business for 11 years. So I know pretty much the Appalachian coals. I use that as an example in my book, that you have these mountains in Appalachia. They're really not mountains. There's erosion. So that's what allows the coal to be up on top of the mountains, where they used to have mountaintop removal. But you have all these seams starting from the top, going all the way down to the bottom, and even under drainage. And they're not mixed up. Some of them are high sulfur, some of them are low sulfur. And
To be a low sulfur coal, that means it was formed in a freshwater environment with the trees and whatnot. To be in a high sulfur coal, you were in a brackish or saltwater environment. And you have these layered from top to bottom. And it's just as you would think. As you go deeper, the fixed amount of carbon in the coal increases due to increased pressure. In other words, the gases are expelled. So you have a higher volatile coal up on top, and as you go deeper, you have more fixed carbon and a lower volatile coal. Now, there were some people that did studies on coal, but they left out the coals in West Virginia, the number 2 coal producing state. I'm assuming that was an oversight, but nothing is really mixed up. You have the same Kendrick shale over the Williamson seam wherever you go, and it's not intermingled with the coal, and it's not over top of any other seams. So what we have is this layering that goes deeper and deeper, and as you go deeper, it gets older and older. So just using that example, there's no way the Earth can be 6,000 years old. It's billions of years old.
And the fact that there's that common theme about the flood in virtually every culture and faith, there are some who have researched and suggested that what has been called Noah's Ark was actually a DNA repository.
Well, I have heard that. I'm not sure I've subscribed to it, but I have heard that, and I will just say that there's a part of my mind I'm keeping reserved open, okay?
Okay, that's fine. Please share with us about your 2004 trip to Israel and Egypt and what you learned there.
Well, I learned a lot. Israel is a beautiful country. No potholes, no trash. I mean, they value their land so much, they even water the cut-throughs going through a bank on your highway. It's beautiful. And as far as Egypt goes, at the time I was there, it was very hard to travel from Israel to Egypt. But Egypt is struggling, let's put it that way. They have a refuge collection problem, and they have some other issues internally, which we can't or won't get into. But viewing the Great Pyramid was spectacular. And I've yet to come up with a word for standing in front of the Great Pyramid, a one-liner that can describe it. It's just, it basically takes your breath away. You're told by some guides there that this was the final incarnation, that we started off with a pile of rocks and we went into a step pyramid. Then the pharaohs wanted to outdo each other. Then we went into a bent pyramid trying to get the angles right. And then Khufu ended up with the Great Pyramid. And my question's always been, what happened after that? All that technology. Well, 80 years later, they're back to a pile of rocks again. And there was really no internal problems in the country. So where did all the technology go? Where did the one-upsmanship go? You're just left to wonder. And for me, the Great Pyramid is old, very old. And the others are an attempt to copy it. And that goes, flat in the face with what you're taught or what you're told. But that's where I stand right now. That's what resonates with me.
What did you feel when you were in the presence of the Great Pyramid?
I felt small. And that's saying something. I'm about 6'1", 260. So I felt small. Boy, I tell you, the technology used for that, let alone how they got the stones there, it's basically an exact mathematical, physical construction of the earth. It's right at the center of the earth. It's socketed into the ground so it can't move. The four sides match up to the cardinal points on the compass. And we could just go on and on. Actually, in the 70s, from the satellites, we realized that the sides are actually concave. Technically, it's 8-sided from what we see, but the degree for which the sides are concave it matches the exact curvature of the Earth. Now, how would they know that? I'm just wondering.
And I guess the real question I'm meaning to ask you is, do you have a sense that we had help in the construction, or that the ancient Egyptians had help in the construction work?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I'm going to throw something out too. It's been said that there's been 36,000 white limestone blocks on each side of the pyramid. That's based on calculations. And the verbal history says that before 1100 AD, that each one of those blocks had a name engraved on it in a language no one could decipher. And each of those names were different. And you think about it, 4 times 36,000, 144,000. Bingo with what's in Revelation with the chosen ones. And each of those names are different. So you can start drawing out, connecting the dots. How many times you think about the term white stone being mentioned. And Jesus saying a white stone, the cornerstone, and on and on. And each of those blocks, it's amazing that were different, had somebody's name on it. Now, there was a big earthquake, so that white Tura limestone was easy picking for mosque in Cairo, so that's pretty much what happened to it. There's a few remaining blocks near the base, but that's pretty much it. And just so our audience will know, lots of times when you see the pyramids of Giza on TV, for some reason the camera focuses in on the middle one that still has some blocks left on top. That is not the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid actually has the flat top.
My guest is W. Wallace Wagner, Jr. His book is called Crossing the Crevasse. Wallace, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Sure. It's available on Amazon in grayscale or full color, as well as Kindle. And I've got a little bio on the back cover they can see on Amazon as well.
And we'll be back with more of Wallace after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM-FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, W. Wallace Wagner, Jr. He's the author of the book, Crossing the Crevasse. So prior to your personal experience that you discussed in 2016, what were your feelings about UFOs and UAPs and the stories of experiencers and contact?
I had an open mind, but I had a lot of family members and a lot of friends that would say, "You don't believe that, do you? I mean, how many have you seen?" I haven't seen any. Have you? Well, no, I hadn't seen any. But when you have firemen and police officers and people who really did not want to be in the public spotlight come forward to tell about their experiences, as well as some airline pilots. I kept a very open mind. And when I had my own sighting, it went from an open mind to beyond belief. Now I know.
What were your immediate feelings, actually the physical feelings, sensations, during and after the sighting?
Well, during the sighting, it did not scare me at all. And, I was so busy delivering mail and I had time issues trying to get back to the post office, so the mail could get back to Roanoke, that I really just put it like in a file cabinet in my brain until I got home. And now I'm at the point where I think that ship or that craft wanted me to see it. And that's why it allowed me to see it long enough to know what I saw. I felt at ease. And in some way, shape, or form, I feel like my spirituality has now had a catalyst, and I am expanding my belief system. Let's put it that way. I know that there's life out there. I know that if God did not want us here, we would not be here. So there's the component of unconditional love. And I really believe that transcends everything we know here on this little world.
Absolutely. Prior to when we started, we were talking about my spiritual background and my grounding in the belief that everything unfolds according to a divine plan, even though we may not see it at that time. Did you sense that was put there for you at that time as part of the divine plan for you?
I do now. I really did not at the time, but I do now. I can look back, on what's happened to me in the last year, for example, as far as developing this spirit inside of me, that I feel that it was put there for me.
So then this changed your direction in terms of your research and your work, and you started looking at parts of the Bible that were describing what people think now of as UFO sightings and experiences. What are some of the references that you found? Well,
there's many. I like to focus on one in Zechariah. And this, of course, is assuming everybody knows about Ezekiel. So I'm not even going to discuss Ezekiel. But Zechariah chapter 6, I find very interesting. And let me make a short read of it here. I looked up again, and there before me were 4 chariots coming out from between 2 mountains. Mountains were made of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black, the third white, and the fourth dappled. All of them were powerful. And I asked the angel who was standing there with me, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel answered me and said, "These are 4 spirits." Now, let's think about that. How many times have we read that and we don't make any connections? Okay, it's 4 spirits. But those spirits came out of a bronze mountain, and they were different colors. In the past, it never resonated with me, but now I'm thinking orbs or crafts. And Zechariah realizes that these are now spirits. So we have a connection between spirits and crafts. And that's something that where my eyes have been opened recently. Many times you'll read the word spirit and you're not realizing that it pertains to a craft. Much like when Jesus was baptized with John the Baptist, and the Spirit came down. And another example in the New Testament, in Revelation 4, John says, after these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I had heard, like the sound of a trumpet speaking with me, said, Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things. Immediately I was up in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was standing in heaven, and someone was sitting on the throne. I have read that 80 times, Victor, and not until I had my sighting did I realize that I was missing the whole point. What resonates with me is that he was called up in the Spirit or into the Spirit, and he saw this door open. That door was a craft. He was called up into the Spirit, which was a craft, and that Spirit flew him around the heavens. And I'm fully convinced of that now.
Do you think the same thing was regarding Enoch?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. If you read the book of Enoch, you realize that he did not just go up and not come back. This was a continual thing. He went up and came back several times. And we look at Elijah the same way. I mean, without a doubt, that chariots of fire, when you read that in the Bible, it's definitely crafts.
Let's talk about some of the other references in the Bible that may be associated with extraterrestrials. Who are the giants of renown in Genesis?
You know, if I gave you an answer, I would have to qualify it probably this way. That if anybody could give you a straight answer on that, I would probably question it. It depends on several things. One of which is, what translation of the Bible do you have?
True.
In my book, I used 4 different translations, and they're all a little bit different when it comes to Genesis chapter 6. You have people that believe the Nephilim came down from the stars and impregnated the women. And you have people that believe that the giants were the offshoot from that, and the flood was to kill the giants. And then you have people that don't know really what to believe. I'm of the inclination that the offspring were the giants, and those giants were called Nephilim. Now, Zechariah Sitchin would disagree with me, and he has his group of followers, but based on the I am and based on several other words, like the Rephaim and some other names, honestly believe that the Nephilim were the hybrid giants. That's my take right now.
Is there a correlation between angels and ETs?
I'm going to say yes. So many times we read Jesus had angels all around him, and when Jesus comes back, he's going to have legions of angels with him. Some translations say 10,000s times thousands. For me, the angels are there now, all around us now. We just can't see them. And there is a reference in 2 Kings with Elisha, not Elijah, but Elisha, which talks of cloaked crafts. His servant could not see them until Elisha prayed, and the servant opened his eyes, and sure enough, there were chariots of fire all around. And honestly believe that a lot of these crafts are what we construed as angels, without a doubt. I mean, if they have power to affect us and perhaps destroy us, and they haven't. So I believe that there is really good out there in the heavens, and that these angels do move around in crafts. Perhaps an example is in Daniel chapter 9. We read where Gabriel flew in swiftly that time. And, you know, my friends from the conservative side will say, well, angels just fly in the air or just appear in the air. And I'm saying, well, no, not really. I used to believe that. Now I believe without a doubt it's a craft, very similar to what Ezekiel saw or very similar to what we see today. And those crafts take on many different shapes and forms, which allows me to believe that we're being visited by a lot of different species from different planets. And they can all still be part of God's kingdom.
Absolutely. In Crossing the Crevasse, you discuss the word glory and in its context as light. Please explain.
Well, glory is one of the hardest words in the Bible to get a good description for. You used to be taught that it was really just the majesty or a component of God. Now I believe that it's light. Anytime you see the word glory, think of light. And that light can be radiant, almost blinding. And it can be in a circular form, or it could be focused. So many times when you read glory, think of the glory shone down, for example. The glory shone down around the shepherds. It formed a circle around them at night, scared them to death as it would anybody. The only light they had back then was from a fire or from lightning. But here's this voice coming from heaven, and this beam of light shoots down and forms a circle around them. It's like a spotlight on a stage. That's called glory. And as Moses is in the cliff of the rock, God passes by. He has glory, light, radiance, illumination, very bright.
And it's interesting how science is now saying that each of us, every human being, actually generates light, photons.
Victor, I just saw a TV program on that, and you're exactly correct. And the more you develop that, the more photons you can create. So I guess from that standpoint, we are all beings of the light. We just haven't developed it.
Absolutely. And perhaps in developing our light, we will connect to the original source of light.
Amen. I fully believe that.
Absolutely. You had talked a little about Zechariah. What about some of the other prophets in prophecy that reflect what we're talking about?
Well, you certainly have Ezekiel. Everybody knows what he saw. And I mentioned Elijah, and we had Elijah who was taken up. You have all the stuff that happened with Moses. The pillar of light at night, to me, that's glory. And the clouds by day, and the parting of the Red Sea. And you think about manna was dropped down to them. And then the Israelites complained. And then all of a sudden, what do they get? Quail dropped down to them. Where did this quail come from, and who dropped it down to them? I submit it was dropped from a craft.
And you also suggest in your book that manna was actually made by some type of a machine.
Possibly. I have a very open mind on that. There are several lines of thought, but let's just keep an open mind on that.
And what do you think about the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, I believe it's out there. We may know where it is. Sometimes getting a permit to dig or to blast into a mountain is challenging and extremely difficult. But without a doubt, it's out there. And for me, it was some type of an electrical device, a communication device, which connected the Israelites directly with God. Now, I guess you could read into that as you wish, but that's pretty much my take on it.
Absolutely fascinating. My guest, W. Wallace Wagner, Jr., he's the author of Crossing the Crevasse. We'll be back with more of Wallace after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On. My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may be asking yourself, should I get it? Will it help me get back to doing the things I love, like meeting friends or traveling? And can I do it without putting my family at risk? You've got questions. That's normal. So visit getvaccineanswers.org for the latest information on the COVID-19 vaccines. Getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you. A message brought to you by the Ad Council and the CDC.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for. That new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions. But they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio. Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is W. Wallace Wagner, Jr. He's the author of the book, Crossing the Crevasse. So, in your opinion, why have governments repressed information about UFOs and contact?
Well, I'll tell you what, you're talking to the right fellow to give you an opinion. We can't handle the truth. I mean, past history, based on what happened in 1938 with H.G. Wells, the Martians are coming, panic, and based upon the Brookings Institution report, basically says we can't handle the truth. And we're trying to hold our capitalist society together. If the truth came out all at once, I believe that it would create such a tear in our society that you're liable to see complete chaos. And I honestly believe that's what they're trying to avoid.
Is there, in your opinion again, I hate the word secret, but a shadow government that is controlling all this?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Look at the Pentagon. They can't even figure out where their money goes to. The accounting project failed. All this money goes into black projects and is basically unaccounted for. And I know we have down crafts, certainly, without a doubt. And the money put into to studying those and creating prototypes and flying them. Some of these crafts are probably ours, but I don't believe we're to the point where we can start on a dime and then fly 28,000 miles an hour and stop on another dime without killing an occupant inside. So I'll stop there.
The law of inertia would suggest that the human occupant would be a pancake.
I'm a firm believer that the laws that we have right now, 20 years from now, will be greatly modified.
I agree with you to that extent. Also, with connection with this covert government and the cover-up and the hiding, there have been people who have lost their lives in an attempt to come forward, haven't there?
Yes. You think of James Forstall, for example, with the Magic 12. And so many other people with the Men in Black, or what we call the Men in Black. You want to be careful on the information you give out. And going through the 50s and 60s and 70s, you were often threatened, to release any information. And it's comforting now that with the Navy coming clean on the white Tic Tacs, very similar to what I saw, or the Tic Tac UFOs, that they have admitted they don't know what they are. And I think that's a step towards disclosure. And then here recently, you had the American airline pilots saw this oblong capsule go over their plane, and they were allowed to talk about it. And they did not lose their jobs, and American Airlines did not deny it. So we are slowly opening up, but it's going to take a lot more discussion and a lot more education and a lot more of efforts on everybody's part to get everyone's eyes opened.
Will we see full disclosure in our lifetimes?
Well, I know your age and you probably know mine. I guess it depends on how long we live, but I'm going to say we might see full disclosure within 25 years. Yes.
What do you think that'll be like?
Awesome. Reality will change in a heartbeat, Victor, for everybody. And I tell you who it's going to affect the most is religion. Divinity schools, they're going to have to come up with some new teachings real fast, overnight. And it's going to be up to the priest and the ministers and whatnot to console and educate the society when that happens. And I believe that's what's lagging right now, quite honestly, is the teaching in a lot of divinity schools is still the same as pretty much it's been for the last 200 years. And so it's left up to the individual, people like Dr. Barry Downing, for example, and Reverend Michael Carter, that and yourself, certainly, that realize that there's a lot more to this than what we've been taught.
And evidence of ETs and life on other worlds, in your opinion and in mine, will actually strengthen people's faith.
I believe so. It will open your mind. We're all part of this cosmic creation. And what, we're just learning quantum physics. You can move a little particle here, and we realize it now moves over there. And I've had some people tell me that these crafts that are moving are really in a bubble. So time really doesn't exist as we think of it. Time only exists for us here now on this planet. So we realize that all these entities are out there, and they're all intermingling with one another. And here we are still struggling as to whether or not we're going to get a $1,400 COVID check. We could be so much more advanced than what we are, but we're just wallowing in the mud.
And quantum physics also is revealing to us on levels that we never expected or saw before, the
definitely.
interconnectedness of everything.
Exactly.
And in that interconnectedness, shouldn't we find love and compassion for one another?
That's what it's all about. That is exactly what it is all about. Not everybody looks like us. That does not mean that they're not from God. God created the universe. God created the heavens, plural. God has, according to the Jewish Talmud, 18,000 worlds to manage. I mean, that's part of their belief structure. Do you think everybody looks the same on each of those worlds? Certainly not. I mean, I put a chapter in my book real fast. I know we're running out of time, but what happens to you if you're out there in space where there's no humidity and no light? Surely your skin becomes drier and almost wrinkled or crinkly, and your eyes become changed. They open up more to allow in light. You lose your muscle mass, for one thing, and become more spindly. You just go on and on. So these entities have been out there as long as we have. And there again, I'm a proponent that we've been on this planet a long, long time as a human race. Perhaps many different, let's say, races have been on this planet, and we're just the latest incarnation here right now.
And in loving and accepting our space brothers and sisters, do you think it'll give us that kick that we need to start loving and accepting each other?
I hope so. Victor, let me just say I hope so, and I pray so.
Absolutely. What would you like readers to take away from Crossing the Crevasse?
Well, realize that I was not belittling the Bible and certainly not discrediting God or Jesus. If anything, I was building them up. Jesus taught honesty, and God is God. And I wrote Crossing the Crevasse, I guess, with a big brush in mind. I wanted to go out and grab as many people as I could and get them to realize that, the blinders need to come off and to read things with an open mind and to understand, have a new understanding. And then in my follow-up book I'm working on now, which will be called Within Grasp, it will be a completely different flavor from what Crossing the Crevasse is. So it will be much more spiritually inclined with things we just can't see and touch, but yet they're fact. So
I understand that you're actually having conversations with people who have had contact or what's been called abduction experiences.
Yes, in fact, abductions, people who's had out-of-body experiences. I've already interviewed Dr. Paul Smith, who is one of the Stargate people with remote viewing, which is a fact, by the way. It really works. People who's had visitations, people who's had sightings, near-death experiences, stuff like that. And it's all real for them. And if there's anyone out there that does not realize that when we die, we're not dead. We're not dead at all. Our spirit lives eternally. We're just here now for spirit training in this body. That's the way I think it. And when we die, we graduate.
And hopefully we graduate with a degree in compassion, a degree in love, a degree in humanity.
Hopefully. It's all about love. I can't, that's the bottom line.
I could not.
That's how we connect with what is out there, is through love.
I could
no
not.
Other way.
I could not agree with you more. My guest, W. Wallace Wagner, Jr., his book is called Crossing the Crevasse. Wallace, please tell our listeners one more time where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Sure. It's on Amazon. It's available in Kindle, grayscale, or a larger color copy. And there's a bio about me on the back cover. You can go on Amazon now and actually flip through some of the early pages and see the bio, as well as kind of an introduction to the book. Also have a website called crossingthecrevasse.com. You can, gain an interest on what's there. I have a few upcoming programs listed on there, and you can also buy a signed color copy directly from me on there. And of course, there's also the link to Amazon from there. Again, that's crossingthecrevasse.com or crossingthecrevasse.com.
Wallace, thank you so much for joining us this week and sharing your experience, your research, your studies, and more importantly, sharing your heart.
Oh, thank you, Victor. This has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Enjoyed it.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.